welcome to the ArtCast. I am clearly not at home. I just pulled up at Larissa Borteh's studio. I'll give you a look. Out here in Chicago. Gonna have a conversation about Larissa's art and show you some pictures probably, but that's about it. I'm already about 10 minutes late, so I'm gonna turn this off and go inside. We are recording.
Uh-oh, okay.
You look great.
Oh, thanks.
I like your hair.
Oh, thank you.
Do you always do it like that, or is that like a summer thing because it's hot?
Sometimes. It's hot. It's just always like, it's like a plant. Like it really, if there's any moisture in the air, it just takes the moisture and then can be just a lot. But yeah, I guess I like doing it for summer. It's hard to keep it down. It's just looking for any kind of thing it can grab onto. I like to keep like a similar outfit, I guess, like all black. I don't know why. Just less decisions, maybe.
Yeah, there's definitely some virtues to having an outfit.
Yeah.
That's why all the cartoon characters have an outfit.
That's true.
It's branding. It's recognizable.
That's right.
Looks. Anyway. Unexpected tangent into hair and fashion.
Yeah.
But I was thinking of this in the car on the way over here, that I do have some like selfish motivations for wanting to ask you about your work.
Oh,
and
okay.
Mainly because like you have a lot of traits I see in your paintings that I wish I had. And I want to like know how you got to this place.
Okay.
So we'll build up to there. I don't want to like jump right into the hard questions, but I do have one question.
Okay.
It's very hard.
Uh-oh. Okay.
And I wanted to know just like your general take on this. I don't think I have an answer for it, but what do you think the value of art is?
Oh my gosh.
And it could be personal to you or like a universal thing. What comes to mind first?
What is the value of art to me?
Like, why should people devote their lives and all their energy and time to making paintings?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I see art as being anything in the physical world. So anything that's been designed, there's somebody who designed it, there's somebody who made it or had it manufactured, there's somebody who sells it. So it's part of this network. And so I feel like, you know, like your t-shirt or that color chair, something. I mean, without that, things would be less stimulating. I don't know. That's not a very good answer, but...
No, that's a great answer, because that is much broader than I was even thinking about it. But you're right. Everything is art. Everything that's been designed creatively, creative decisions were made to bring that thing into being. It definitely is art.
Yeah. For painting, so you said, what did you say? You said for painting...
Yeah, maybe let's narrow it to painting for a moment.
Yeah. Painting, why dedicate your life to it? Spend your time making it?
Yeah.
I find the process to be very pleasurable and a great escape. I don't play music, but maybe similar to a release of music or of athleticism, like you get those good endorphins. Like I feel that way when I'm making something where I can break free from this day to day. Maybe there are some magical things that can happen day to day, but I don't know. I like it as, you know, an escape. And whether someone else finds value in it, it's not, I'm more interested in just the process of making it and sharing things and experimenting with things and an environment that I can control on a surface versus in the world, there's so much that is out of our control.
It's interesting that you bring up control, because obviously there's control in these paintings. You were holding the brush to make all the marks, but is there a little element of like not being in control sometimes in a painting. Like a splatter. I'm looking at that one over there that we'll show later, but there's some drips and like splatters that are less controlled. How does that fit into painting being a like space of control?
Yeah. It's sort of like a conversation. I'll start by I respond. I'll make a mark or put a color down. Mm-hmm. And then sometimes it responds back. It doesn't always do maybe what I'm expecting it to do. And then I'll respond to that. So I kind of like the moments of this like slippage of something a little bit unexpected happening, or, sometimes I'll try to maybe draw. Maybe I get really stuck and I think, I'm going to draw a little bit, or I'm going to, maybe mock something up on my computer to get an idea of color or something. Mm-hmm. But that's never really what happens for me when I'm actually painting it. There's always something different happens that's more exciting than what I could maybe think could happen.
Mm-hmm. I didn't know you mocked stuff up on a computer. Would you like start a sketch from scratch in a digital form, or are you editing like a photo of a painting with different color palettes or something?
Sometimes only if I'm really stuck, I can take a picture and then I'll maybe just draw a little bit on my computer on an iPad or in Photoshop or something. And it's usually to get some kind of a feeling of composition or color or something like that. But I've never started from scratch with one. But sometimes it's helpful and sometimes it's not, because it never looks the same.
If you try to translate a digital sketch into a real painting, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see that. It's the same for me. I can't really make the leap. It seems like such a huge part of your paintings is just the textures of oil paint and all the organic things it does. Let's circle back to the paintings themselves, but could we take a little journey back in time briefly and find out how you started painting?
Sure.
Like I've known you for like over 10 years at this point. Yeah. So I know little bits and pieces of your backstory. Like I know your parents, they're like scientists, right? They're in the sciences.
Chemists, yeah.
Chemists. So were there any artists in your family that you maybe took as inspiration, or was it you the first?
Well, my grandma on my mother's side, she does a lot of sewing, and she sewed all of my mom and her brothers and sisters their clothing. She worked as a seamstress for many years, and my grandpa on that side of the family, he also did a lot of woodworking, and so they would make toys for children in Haiti that were made out of wood, and my grandma would paint them. And I remember when I was a kid, they built me this dollhouse that my grandpa constructed, and then my grandma put carpet and painted the walls and things and put little bushes on the outside. And my mom makes paintings, and she's really good. Awesome. She makes paintings on the beach, and I remember growing up in our house, she had these little small canvas panels that she did of mountains. And she actually let me use her oil paint set for the first time. I think I was in, maybe in high school. I watched a lot of TV when I was a kid. Loved it. I loved cartoons. And so I would just watch cartoons and then draw them. And I remember having these, they're like maybe you had these. Did you ever have those coloring books where there's the tracing paper between each of the coloring book pages, so you could trace the lines of the coloring book?
I don't know if I've seen that. I've had plenty of regular coloring books, but not with the tracing part. So you would like draw your own version of the illustration and then color that, or was it just a separate drawing practice? Like it's tracing paper, so you can't really like color it, can you? After you
No, not really. Yeah, I'd kind of I would draw from the cartoons, and then I had these books, and I could trace the coloring book page that was underneath the tracing paper to work on the lines and figure out how they were drawn. So I had a lot of these, like Snoopy. I love Snoopy. Still love Snoopy. Mickey Mouse. DuckTales, like all of those. I loved watching them. Some of the grotesque cartoons, like Ren and Stimpy. I love those, and seeing like the close-ups of the characters' faces that were hand painted. I think with gouache or watercolor or something like that. Those hand painted cells that they would hold on for a while, and then I remember. I think in a lot of those cartoons, like DuckTales, they have a Mondrian, like kind of hidden to like hide all these notable paintings in some of the imagery of the movement of the animation.
Wow, okay. So did you start drawing your own cartoons or something once you traced enough Snoopy's and Ren and Stimpy's? Like, did you try making your own characters at any point, or did you go right into like naturalistic life drawing from there?
I think I tried some characters, and I tried making some comic books that I'd staple together. Yeah, I think I tried a little bit. I don't really remember any of them in particular. But then, yeah, I think
What ages are we talking about? Like 10 or something, or younger or older?
5, like 4 or 5 to maybe 10, 12, and then always taking art classes from elementary school to middle school and high school, and so which were more like building skills and that kind of thing.
Did you know all along through like at least high school that art was something you wanted to pursue outside of school and like make it your career, your life?
I didn't know that you could do that.
Yeah.
What about you?
I didn't really think about it either. Like kind of in the
Yeah.
same way that I think teens can be naive, but also very what's the word? I'm blanking on vocabulary right now. Optimistic about the future. Like you just think it's all going to work out if you follow your interests, which was a gamble, I now realize in retrospect, to not to go right into art school. But
Yeah.
then you went to SVA for college.
Yes.
And you went right in from high school graduation, then moved to New York. That's such a big, huge step. And something I
Yeah.
think a lot of artists, young artists, myself included, like always fantasized about making that move, but I never did it. Probably never will, but it's still like a weird pipe dream in the back of my head, moving to New York. How was it? How did you did you enjoy it? Was it hard at first? What was it like?
Yeah, there were challenging times. So, I mean, at the time, I guess I was so kind of naive, and like, it didn't really seem like that everything just sort of happened. So I wasn't really thinking so much, maybe. I don't know. Like, but looking back, I'm like, wow, that's a really big difference from where I grew up in the suburbs of Columbus, Ohio, and then go to New York, and it was just totally different, just right out the gate. I mean,
Did SVA have dorms for freshmen, or did you have to get an apartment right away, or where'd you live?
we had dorms. They had, I think, two or three buildings at the time. I think they have more now, but I had a dorm on 21st Street and 3rd Avenue, I believe.
Wow.
Yeah, so
What is that, like East Village or something? Or
little
Gramercy?
close to Gramercy. Yeah, and actually they did have a Gramercy dorm as well.
Oh. That's an amazing place to suddenly be as a 18, 19-year-old.
Yeah, it was great. Yeah. It's tough to adjust to, I think, in some ways. A lot of people who went there were from the New York, New Jersey area, East Coast. And so me and my roommate, she was also from the Midwest. She was from Texas. So it was kind of cool that we were paired together.
just by happenstance, or did they put kind of the out of state people
I feel like
in rooms together?
they might have, yeah. But that was nice because I think we both were, well, I don't know. I mean, yeah, it was nice to have somebody where I don't know what I'm trying to say.
No, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Did you eventually move out of Manhattan and like later in your college career, or
Yeah,
like where, Brooklyn or
yeah,
Queens?
I was in Brooklyn maybe halfway through college. I found a sublet with a couple girls I met from Craigslist and lived in Brooklyn for a while. And then after school, I moved out and then lived with some friends.
Nice. Did you stay in New York between coming to SAIC and finishing at SVA? Like you took like 2 years off? Or...
Yeah, I took 2 years off. I stayed there. It was a really hard time. It was around 2008, so it was very difficult to find like any kind of work, and so I was working just like coffee shops and different things here and there. I was an artist assistant. I tried a lot of things, and then
Anyone famous?
um
You don't have to name names, or we can cut it out. But
I worked for the estate of Michael Goldberg. He's considered a second generation abstract expressionist. And that was right before I moved to Chicago. I worked there for, I don't know, maybe a year, 6 months, somewhere in there. And it was pretty cool because his wife, Lynn Umlauf, is a really great sculptor, and she taught at SVA. And so I found the job from the school job board, and then they had this really amazing studio on 2 Bowery. And so there was John Giorno had a studio underneath us. Linda Banglis has a studio there. And just a lot of, it was called The Bunker from William S. Burroughs. And so the studio that we were working in, that was Michael Goldberg's space, it was like an old YMCA, and Mark Rothko used to paint in there. And so there was red paint on the floor from his Seagram building paintings, and it was so neat. And it had
awesome.
kind of a eerie feeling to the space too.
I think maybe it was haunted.
Maybe a little bit. There's so much like energy.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And how long would you say you worked there? Just a few months or like a year?
It was maybe 6 months to a year, somewhere in there.
Cool.
Yeah.
Were you painting Michael Goldberg's pieces? Were you like just helping him set up? Or I feel like artist assistantships can run the gamut from like actually making the person's work for them, or just being behind the scenes. Like how involved in the painting were you?
Yeah, we were doing a lot of, well, he died kind of suddenly, so I had never met him, so he had passed several years before I started
you said the
working
estate.
there. Yeah, his estate, sorry.
I know, that's my fault. I missed that. I overlooked that.
Yeah, no worries.
So you're like cataloging, or like...
Cataloging, yeah, lots of cataloging, because he had so many works that weren't signed or just weren't documented in any way. And so me and this other man named Tove, who was sort of like directing the estate, we would work side by side and kind of, he created a whole inventory system of how to catalog the work with different numbers on the back. And so I would write some of the numbers on the back, and then we had all these spreadsheets where we would plug it in, and we would say, which paintings were in storage and at which places, and which were at which galleries, and which were in the studio. And then we would also document the work. We'd take pictures. Some works were really loose, and the material was coming off, like a lot of pastels and things like that. So we would try to fix the work, or if there was a area that needed maybe a drawing, got a little bit, the material got removed or something, we'd have to really carefully kind of work with that. And
so you're kind of like got a crash course in art restoration
Oh my
while
gosh.
you were there.
Yeah, it was pretty neat too, because there was this man, and he would restore some of Michael's paintings, and one of them was from the 50s. One of his earlier works, it was figurative. So Michael made just really abstracted work. So it was sort of unusual painting to see for my first time of seeing it. And the conservator told us that he actually took the painting and put it on some kind of special table, and it sucked the oil paint off of the surface, and then they put it on a completely new canvas because the canvas was rotting.
Oh my god.
Which, yeah, isn't that wild?
Did it look like the original painting? Like, how does that?
Yeah.
How is that? Are his paintings more like stain based or something? Or I can't see how that could transfer like a distinct brushstroke. Like,
I know.
onto a different surface.
It was wild. I think that painting it looked fairly thick.
Okay.
Not a lot of transparency. There wasn't, that I can remember, I don't remember a lot of like really apparent brushwork. I remember like more flatter reds and greens. Yeah, it always amazed me, like how do they do that?
Yeah, that's wild. I remember my mom trying to tell me to take some conservation restoration classes in undergrad, like trying to push
Wow.
me to have a bankable career after I graduated. But I
Yeah.
was always like, that seems like too scientific for me. But I've met some people who work in art restoration. They seems
Oh yeah?
like a good job.
Wow.
Um,
What do they do?
well,
So-
one of them like was working at a place in Pilsen or something, just touching up paintings that are like flaking off and stuff. And there's that famous YouTuber from Chicago, the Baumgartner Restoration. Have you seen this guy on
I
Instagram
don't think
or
so.
YouTube? He's like got millions of followers around the world for restoring old paintings
Wow.
here. He has a very charismatic voice and appearance. I think that's why he's so
That's amazing.
successful. They're good to watch though. I don't really
Huh.
watch a whole episode, but I see the 1 minute reels sometimes.
So he shows his process of,
Yeah, he does.
that's so neat.
It is. It's cool.
I've always-
Something Baumgartner. First name might be something.
Okay, I'll try to find him.
I'll send you a link.
Yeah, I've always been curious if they use paint from that time, like how, because the paint ages, or maybe it doesn't
Oh.
matter. I've always been curious about that.
Well, where are they going to get centuries old paint? I
Yeah,
would assume it
maybe
has to be mixed
Yeah.
from scratch, but probably in such a way where it mimics the old paintings. But I would think paint that's actually that old would be extremely rare and
Yeah.
dried out or
Yeah.
something. You started talking about transparency with Michael's work, and that was a big thing I wanted to talk to you about today.
Mm-hmm.
Like your paintings for maybe 5-10 years, or like when we were in grad school together, you were painting a lot more thickly, I remember.
Mm-hmm.
And lately, you've embraced like this transparency with lots of like saturated color with the luminosity coming from the ground. Was there a conscious shift you tried to make away from like, and there are moments of still like textured paint, looks like a palette knife there in the middle, but it's very luminous, almost more watercolor. How did that shift start to happen?
I got kind of lost in the sauce. Like I started just using so much paint that it was just so opaque I couldn't do anything with the surface, except really I just started going darker, and then the paintings became really black, and I just couldn't, and muddy, and it was too frustrating. And so, but my drawings, I make a lot of ink drawings and some gouache paintings. And I liked some of the moments in those where you can see through things. And that was always something that was important in just my drawing in general.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just wanted to strip things back and have a little bit more space. And yeah, so I would say it was conscious. It just became too much and too loaded.
Yeah, I think it's a great evolution. I love the way these are brightening up and like.
Oh,
I think luminosity just gives so much more vitality to colors. Translucency is often overlooked with oil painting specifically.
yeah. You do a lot of translucency,
I
right?
do, yeah. And it started when I started using oil ground, which like I realized was like so slick that the paint wasn't soaking in the way I was used to with acrylic gesso. So that really enabled it, and I never looked back since kind of discovering oil ground. But I've actually been going back to using more like opaque paint
Oh,
recently
yeah.
for the first time. And well, it's been a couple years now of bringing it back in. Honestly, inspired by seeing students in beginning oil painting classes and the way they paint kind of inspired me to go back to
Yeah.
using paint in that more traditional way, or like loading on thick paint for emphasis on an area. Like all the tools are useful, I
Yeah.
feel like. So it wasn't just a mood or a personality shift or something, and like wanting to make brighter paintings on a thematic level. Because I've also felt like your paintings were often like about this dark interior world, it seemed.
Yeah.
when you were using when your palettes were very like black and blue, and
Yeah.
there would be thick like black paint, um, which is super powerful. And like those have it's like a whole series body of work you made like that. But was it mainly a technical desire to have more like space in the composition, or are you just happier in these? Or is it some
Um,
of both?
maybe a little bit of both. Yeah, I think a little bit of both.
Good.
Yeah.
That's another thing I think is inescapable if you're painting truthfully, which I think you obviously are. You're not like
But
trying
what does that
to.
mean?
What does it mean?
Yeah.
It means that you're not trying to please someone else with a painting. You're painting what you want to paint. I wish I could think of a smarter way to say that, but they don't they don't feel like dishonest or inauthentic. I'm just giving synonyms now, but do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
I see a lot
Sometimes
of
it's hard though, like their, voices sometimes it's really difficult to be in a space where things can flow freely instead
oh
of,
yeah,
I don't know, do you have that?
yeah. It's the hardest thing in the world to,
Yeah.
and it's not a like you flip a switch and you don't have to think about it anymore. You crack the code of making a painting or making art, and you can just keep doing it and doing it. There always are going to be those doubts and voices creeping in, like, is this the right thing to do?
Yeah.
But as long as the like majority of your influence or inspiration is not listening to those voices, I think you're good. And that little bit of like voices peppering in the studio, like thinking about other art you like, and all that's part of it too. And you can't really
Yeah.
have it all. What's the word, solipsism, where you like
Mm.
deny the existence of anything outside of yourself?
Mm.
Is I don't know if that's the right word, but I don't think that kind of practice is really possible. And if you are doing that, I would argue it's probably not a very good practice.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
ultimately, you do want to be communicating and engaging with other people. Got off on a weird tangent there, but I, I think it just comes across in your work that you're figuring this out for yourself and not for someone else, which is what I try to do too. Like,
Yeah.
you ever like just scroll Instagram and see all the paintings out there, and then
There's so many.
there's so many paintings, and some of them look so good. Like, I'm
Uh-huh.
blown away by like this painting by someone I've never heard of, and I'll go to their profile and look at a few more, and I don't want to name any names, obviously, and I don't even want to describe the type of paintings I'm talking about too much, but
Yeah.
painting that's very self-referential and like internet culture based.
Okay.
Even just painting from photos, like where that's like the whole point, like is replicating the photo.
Yeah.
All that stuff feels like it's trying to please someone else, or it's trying to get noticed, and it might do a very good job of doing that because if a lot of skill was involved and they have the right taste, but I don't find painting a photo that enjoyable. So I don't think the people who are doing that are really in love with their practice either.
Yeah. Maybe not. Yeah, I mean, maybe there are some things about painting from photo maybe is satisfying. I don't know.
It can be very satisfying, like a technical exercise. Maybe you just really want to replicate that image, and it's a particular kind of art I'm thinking about, I guess. I feel kind of emboldened in this prejudice because I was reading an interview with, Neo Rauch and Rosa Loy. They're like a married couple, German painters.
Yeah.
And they were giving a joint interview for a catalog for a show a two-person show of their work, and they have a almost identical philosophy to painting, it seems. And their work looks actually very similar, like figures and surreal, distorted spaces. But they were both so anti-painting photographs. And I don't mean painting from photographs as like one of your many references. I think everyone does that if you're painting representationally at all. But to just like slavishly copy a photo and that's your work, they were like, that's such a waste of time. Like, why? I want to see someone's psyche and their like, inner world instead of just a copy of this digital representation.
Yeah.
Do you ever bring in photo references for like
No.
a particular type of flower or tree? Or it's all from your imagination.
Yeah. Sometimes I'll maybe quickly, sometimes it's things that are around, like from life, and I'll change it. Or sometimes if I am putting something in, I'll maybe quickly look at a photo maybe that I took. But I never paint from a photo. I'll kind of look at it and get an idea of what it is or what it feels like. And then I'll transcribe that as more of a, I don't know, hopefully some kind of an inner sensation where it's not just the thing we're looking at. Like, we're having a conversation, but there's so many degrees to the conversation and so many things that are going on that are unspoken in some ways. You know what I mean?
The conversation between you and the painting, or the painting, you and the viewer who sees the painting?
Yeah, it could be between the viewer, or it could be, I don't know. I want to capture something that's not necessarily tangible in some ways, because sometimes there are things like a conversation as an example, like that there's an undercurrent that maybe isn't seen, but it's felt. It's maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, I feel that.
Yeah.
There's like a subtext to the painting in a way. Like there's
perhaps a subtext.
Like just a sort of ambiguous emotional feeling that accompanies a painting. I feel like that kind of like those layers of meaning are very tied to color. Would you agree that each color palette has its own kind of feeling?
Yeah.
And when we put in some photos of you have 3 distinct color palettes on the 3 biggest paintings on view.
Oh gosh, yeah.
From like gold, yellow to blue, and green, of course, very like natural trees and sky colors, and then this like very rosy, fiery pink and orange palette.
Yeah.
Do they? Oh, and like more yellow and earth tones there.
Yeah.
Do you plan? You said sometimes you'll mock things up digitally to just try out a color palette. So it sounds like you do. It is somewhat premeditated. Like you're gonna make this sort of a yellow painting, or
yeah. I would say it's definitely premeditated in some ways. Like the yellow painting, I hadn't done a painting that had that kind of golds in it, and I wanted it to be really warm. I saw some great Jennifer Packer paintings, who I'm in love with. I love her work so much, and she has this really great portrait. I believe it's pretty small, and it just has this amazing golden glow in it. I love how she keeps things open, and so I was kind of thinking about that one, and then I put that painting down, and I wanted to use some erasure in the ground, the colored ground that I put down. And then for the colors that are kind of on top, I have a lot of different palettes going. So sometimes I'll pull from one palette from maybe I was working on this painting, and there's some like secondary colors, maybe like some of the greens, or like this tanny yellow color, and then maybe I'll throw them into that one. So I don't know what I'm trying to say, but I'll maybe work a little bit on one, and I'll think like, oh, orange, or sometimes it's a color that, like, I haven't done a lot of orange painting, so I'll do that, and then kind of build from some of the other things that are around, and then it kind of pollinates to different ones.
That's such a great metaphor. You're like a little bee buzzing from canvas to canvas,
buzzing around
paint.
Yeah.
Is that literally how you work with like a painting on each wall, and kind of you work on it in that particular zone of the studio, or do you have one main wall that you like to work on in here?
So far in this space, I've been working on just this wall.
Okay.
But I want to be working on all of them once I'm a little bit more settled. But yeah, I'll kind of like take things down and put new things up, and one is maybe going really poorly, and so I like to try to have some that are kind of prepared and ready that I can just work on, while some of the others are in this awful stage.
There's some in here that you consider an awful stage?
Maybe some of them, I think. Some of them aren't out, but yeah, they don't always. Do you work on multiple at the same time?
Oh yeah, I have way too many going. Sometimes it gets overwhelming that I feel like I need to finish something, but I just would rather start something new, and then But I have paintings I'll add to over months that they look almost done, but I just like, one day I'll get an impulse to work on something a bit more, which is a relatively new development for me, actually, for probably like the whole time since grad school to maybe 2 years ago. I would finish a painting in like 2 to 3 sessions, just transparent color on oil ground and no opaque color at all to render things any more than what was in the initial wash. So it was a very like cut and dry process. Then I started to love oil paints again, and like the chalky, opaque gooiness of using actual opaque colors and not just the transparent palette I was using. Which, by the way, a lot of these colors are definitely transparent, right? What yellow or gold did you use for the ground in that? Is it just like a cadmium yellow?
Yeah, I think it's a cadmium.
It's so luminous, though. And and cadmium's pretty opaque, so did you thin it with a lot of oil or something?
Mm-hmm.
What's your go-to oil?
I've been using a lot of walnut oil.
Me too. Walnut's great.
Yeah, that's your go-to?
I love the way it drips. For big areas, I have 2 cups of medium on my palette at all times. One is walnut oil and one is stand oil.
Oh, yeah.
And they're kind of opposite ends of the viscosity scale. Like stand oil is really thick and goopy, so sometimes I just mix them together.
Oh, yeah?
Which I don't know how smart that is, but I haven't had any issues yet. So, but we've been talking about color and how that kind of develops in the paintings, and it's very intuitive and kind of the pollination you described. But what about composition? Do you plan something like this out on paper in a watercolor sketch first, or do you just start with some gestures and let the painting dictate its shape?
Kind of both. Sometimes I don't know. If I go into something with a plan, it never goes well. It never goes how I would plan it, or I just get bored.
Yeah.
But sometimes I'll make, in ink drawings, maybe there'll be like some piece of something in there that I've done in an ink drawing, and I'll use that as a starting point, and then maybe it gets covered up. But then sometimes it shows or it's partially shown, but usually that's a way I use that as to break the ice a little bit, because I tend to go into it not really knowing exactly what's gonna happen or if it'll even satisfy me, if I'll even like it. I might not like it. If I'm open to that possibility, then I feel like then things can, I don't know, work out a little bit better. That it's not too precious. I'm not putting everything into this one thing that might not work out.
Yeah, I 100% agree. It's funny how that just difference in mindset can be so tangible in the finished product. Like you can just feel looking at it if it was preciously like planned out. And it could be the most beautifully executed painting in the world, but there's that little extra, like, not even little, it's like a huge difference in the spirit of a painting if it was made spontaneously on some level. Is that always the case? Like I was looking through your website, and there's some paintings that are very like clear images, and maybe some of these are older, like your show at Julius Caesar a couple of years ago would be like a single, very like a figure in a bed or a alarm clock or a car. Or I saw a more recent painting that looked like sand dunes with trees and birds floating. And that looks like it's such a clear, vivid, single image.
Yeah.
Even this double tree painting here, like, I don't know how you would keep it that minimal in terms of subject, unless it was a just spur of the moment thought, like I'm going to paint 2 trees and nothing else. Like how?
Yeah.
What was the first gesture you made? Was it the blue, like a sky?
Yeah.
Was the first step?
I think it was the blue. Yeah. And then, yeah, I mean, I guess I went into that one thinking I want to do an exterior space. I want to try some trees. I haven't really tried a lot of trees. And then I just made some marks, and then I stepped back and I thought, well, that's unfortunate. I made this really big canvas that's 6 or 7 feet. I don't know how big it is, but I did all that work and the prep and the surface, and I just made this painting and it's just a few marks, and now it feels like it could be complete. And so then I stopped.
I love that though. I feel like that's the mark of mature art in a way, where you're not just trying to cram everything you can do into a painting. You recognize when it's enough, and you stop, and maybe that's where the value comes in. It is like hours and lots of dollars of the supplies and prep time, and you invested it all in that one like 5-minute painting session.
Yeah, it's like a joke
in a way, but
it can work, I guess.
If you were building a house or something, a lot of it's the prep time, bringing the materials to the site, and then actually putting that piece of drywall up. It just takes a couple minutes.
Yeah.
For like one wall, and then it's done. It's done when it's done. And I've been really struggling to recognize that moment in my own work of like when it can be enough. Like, so I really admire how you were able to stop at that stage, and it's not out the door yet. Like, you're not saying, like, you're not putting it in a show and saying it's completely done, but it might be, and you're letting it. When did that happen? Like, when did you do that painting? How long has it sat in that state?
Probably January.
Okay. Yeah, that's probably the most sparse one you have out of the large canvases. But think about the artists that we love, and someone like Rothko, or like 2 squares on a canvas, and that's that's it.
I love the places in your paintings where you leave it kind of open too. Like I feel like you made this, I think it was a bathtub. This is really great. It seemed large. I hadn't seen it in person, but I think it was a bathtub at the bottom and maybe two figures. I think you said something about how you went back into it or you weren't sure if it was done or something like that, but it was so strong. It was so striking.
Well, thank you. I think I know the one you're talking about, and it does have some like vague blob forms that aren't really figures in it. That could be the part where I just said, fuck it, that's staying the way it is. But there's so many moments where I like go too far and I overwork them. So
What do you do when you do that?
after it's been overworked.
Yeah,
or-
do you stop? Do you paint over it?
Usually I just keep going and going and render the crap out of something just because it's like a finite endpoint. Like I know if I render this enough, it'll look like a reasonable imitation of some Baroque painting I've admired in a museum. But it's, in the end of the day, that's always my like pinnacle goal of like wanting to paint like, I don't know who I can say that won't sound incredibly pretentious because my paintings are nothing like Van Eyck or something, but just that level of finesse over everything.
Yeah.
But I'm also lazy and don't want to invest as much time as those artists did. So I'm always looking for shortcuts, and it actually works out in my favor that like it is nice to leave parts of a painting more sparse and open. And I wonder what painters from that era would look like if they had our modern sensibilities with regards to leaving things kind of unfinished. They might be even more incredible paintings if like you would see a Renaissance painting and there's just like a very loose, wild brushstroke. I guess people like El Greco and there's a few who were bold enough to do that, but for the most part, it was just everything was as finished as they could make it. Da Vinci had a lot of very unfinished paintings because he just would move on to the next project without thinking about them, but they're more tied to drawing. It's not really the same painterly thing. You asked me what I do when I overwork a painting, and I think I sort of answered it in a half-assed way, but I was wondering if you ever, like, if you hit a point where you feel like you've gone too far or you don't like something, will you completely remove that day's brushstrokes and start fresh the next day or something?
Yeah. If I can save it, I'll try to save it.
So how do you know a gesture is a keeper then? Do you know as soon as you've made it, or is sometimes you have to let it sink in and reflect on it later?
I usually know pretty quickly that it doesn't work.
Okay, so you
Yeah.
more notice the opposite, like when you don't like it, than when you love it.
Yeah. Sometimes I'll keep things that I don't like to work against it, to maybe make some tension in the painting. But sometimes it might not necessarily be a certain kind of mark. It could be the quality of the paint. Like maybe it's too opaque, or maybe the transparency didn't work, or it could be the color doesn't work with the rest of the painting. And sometimes I like when the color it can be a little bit bad, but sometimes if it becomes all of what sucks up my attention in something, that's usually when I feel that it's not right.
What if it sucks your attention can that ever be a positive thing, that your eyes keep getting drawn to one corner of the canvas for some reason, or is that always a bad sign?
It could be a positive. Yeah, it could be a positive.
Okay. So you meant distracting in a bad way.
Yeah, distracting in a bad way. Like it doesn't have to all be balanced everywhere. I don't think I necessarily want that. I like when things are a little bit unbalanced. But yeah, maybe it's just something that just sucks up too much. It could be, maybe it's good when everything kind of leads up to this one moment. I think that can work for me in a painting when I'm making it. But if it's something that is so dominating and doesn't really jive with the rest of it in so many degrees, then that's usually something that that doesn't work.
I see what you're saying. I wanted to ask you about some of the imagery I see in these. I don't know if I'm sometimes imagining things, but I often see like heads and feet and hands, and sometimes it's like illusory or elusive. Both of those things. Like, I don't know if this big red shape is actually a leg standing on the top of the canvas, or okay, it is.
Yeah, it is.
And then is that a head in the upper left? I feel like I see hair and a side of a profile.
Yeah, there's a head, and then there's another head right to the right of it with the red, loose red around it.
Oh, I see it now. How about the parts where it's like there's this hand reaching down, it looks like holding, lifting up. It feels like there's motion from something dry brushed over those lines, those like darker purple lines. I don't see that in too many other places, like brushing out some line work to make it kind of do that hatchy thing. Do you know what I'm talking about? Like right in there.
In the pink, in here, this?
Yeah, no, the
This?
pink lines
This?
to the left.
In here, this?
Yeah,
Where?
right on that. Like these, these like streaks from, that's like taking a brush wall after those lines are painted and like spreading them out, kind of.
Yeah, I wanted some movement. I was looking at a lot of swimming. I like to swim laps, and I like the ripples of the water over the body get this distortion. So I wanted to get some kind of movement that was similar to that, but it's still sort of like space.
Can a painting contain multiple emotional spaces? Like the tense corner, the happy corner. That's probably way too literal, but like, do you think of putting more than one emotion into a painting?
Yeah, I think there can be moments of that. They tend to not be so many different temperaments in one. That's why it can be challenging to revisit a painting, or, I had that injury, and then like I had some work going, and then not having a lot of time in the studio, and then coming back, it can lose. I can work my way back in, but sometimes it loses the moment just from the time, and then I become disengaged.
If that happens, do you try to re-enter the mental space of a painting, or do you just call it a painting from the past? And like, what's the longest you've waited between like passes at a painting? Have you ever gone back to something from years ago and added to it or changed it?
I have, yeah. And I've worked kind of back in. I've gotten back in a little bit, but some of them can be so too far for me to access anymore.
Yeah. I guess it's a different perspective on what a painting can be, like if it's just a time capsule of that moment, that day or week of your life when you painted it, and it should stay that way. Or I've been thinking about it more as like a book or something you can keep adding chapters to, and it changes, because you're going to be such a different painter if you worked on a painting 2 years ago than you are now, and to bring everything that's happened in the last whatever length of time back into that world, I think can be really powerful.
Yeah.
I've been working on some old paintings and like grad school era paintings, just like pulled them out of this pantry. I store a bunch of like medium-sized canvases in and started working on them, and it's actually really fun.
Really?
I don't know if you have any. You have so many canvases here. Maybe you should pull some out and work on them. Or I don't know. What do you think the desire to make a good painting is a trap, and that is not the right desire to have?
And is not a good desire to have? Is that what you
Yeah,
said?
or you said something interesting earlier, which is that like you got to be okay with maybe you won't like it when it's done, and that's okay. You kind of have to accept that as a possibility before you start.
Yeah.
So when you start a painting, are you trying to make a good painting, or are you just making a painting at that moment?
I think sometimes I'm trying to make a good painting, but then that can be the trap for me of getting stuck or not making progress. But then usually if I mess it up in some way, I'm just going to put this, I know this is going to be wrong, but I'm just going to do it. Then that usually helps. And sometimes I'll be thinking of doing that for a while, but I can't. I'm not brave enough to do it yet.
Like intentionally messing it up.
Yeah, just something, because sometimes the things are kind of floating at this nice pace. It could be done. It's not quite done. It's not satisfying. I need like a dessert or a vegetable or something. But the one thing is going to disrupt it, and that disruption can open up more channels for me to be free. And maybe it's something I have to wipe away.
Like it's just there momentarily to get you motivated to make some moves, to fight it,
Yeah.
whatever that thing is. Like I think I know exactly what you mean, but I've never considered doing it as a purposeful gesture to mess it up. But that actually sounds like a really smart strategy. Like
I don't know.
mess it up on purpose so that you have, for one thing, it removes the pressure of the perfection of an empty canvas. Like
Yeah.
any move you make on it has to make it better. Otherwise you're making it worse, right?
Yeah.
But if you go in and mess it up at the start, then it gives you that freedom to do whatever you want. During quarantine, I especially saw you do a lot of these still lifes at your kitchen table, and like very like realistic gouache and watercolor paintings.
Yeah.
And I guess I was curious why your big work on canvas is so much from the intuitive and the imaginative, and you've never brought in that, like you've never done a giant still life of a Bounty paper towels bag.
Yeah. I've thought about it. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I used to work pretty realistically. But I just didn't, I kind of did it and was like, okay, I did that. But it's not, I wanted more. I wanted it, I don't know, I just wanted more. And so then I started doing things like this, which is, yeah, it's very different. Some people said some very nice things about those, and like, you know, maybe there's something to those and not here. I don't know, maybe they're just different. Yeah, I don't know. I see the students working from life, and I'm like, oh, I love that. I think that's what's so great about, you know, the first time somebody's painting and you're working from life, is there's so many possibilities there. And you're learning the color and you're trying to match things, but you can still be expressive. And what excites me in watching people paint is that everybody does it different. And I think that's so fascinating. So that, like, I don't want to look at a bunch of paintings that look the exact same. I want to see each person's where things are accurate, but it's their perception of those, you know, bottles or flowers or whatever it may be.
Yeah. I'm really glad to hear you say that, because sometimes I get insecure that I'm not giving enough of a like step-by-step, here's how you do it. Because I notice people having drastically different approaches, and I love that. I think they should kind of do whatever comes naturally to some extent, and you can kind of give advice to steer them from there.
Yeah, and like having them step back and observe their process, I think, is so interesting too. Like when I was making those still life paintings, something that kept me interested in doing it, and I just did it because I was like, I don't know what to do. I can't go to the studio or in quarantine. I feel like a loss for any kind of motivation in life. Like, but I want to do something. I just don't have the brain capacity to like, I can't like think, I can't like think through things at the moment. I just want to like be present. And so that's how those started. But when I was working on them, what kept me interested was watching the process unfold. And like sometimes in the process of working, when I would kind of step back a little bit, some things that weren't, completely finished, or that maybe weren't right in the first marks when everything was starting to come together, those were the parts that I enjoyed the most. And so I think some of that seeped back in, and definitely a lot of the moments in some of those paintings came back in here once it was safe to meander about. And yeah.
I definitely see elements from those watercolors in this new work. Just, I don't know if you were already doing the oil ground and transparent color in oils before all that stuff. I know you'd worked a lot with ink, which is similar, and watercolor before then, but even just little fragments of like leaves and flowers and trees, I feel like even if you're not referencing those paintings directly, they're coming back out again when you're painting from your mind.
Yeah, and it kind of relieved some pressure of like what to paint as like a thing. Like what thing do I put in here? Like what space, or like what is this? And it's more about how you paint it.
Yeah. Sometimes I feel like knowing what to paint, like having an idea before you paint, is totally the wrong way to go about it. But that's such a... I remember getting like ridiculed for that in like grad school seminars by like, there's different schools of thought. Some teachers thought you had to be able to explain your work to the T and like break down why you're making decisions, but that never gelled with my outlook on art.
Yeah.
But it works for other people, different
for sure
approaches.
So when you go into something, do you have a plan?
Sometimes. And when I said I think it's like the wrong way, like I do it from time to time. Like, I should clarify, it feels wrong, but I also know it's sometimes essential to not like just waste a canvas. Have a little inkling of like a vision that you want to project, but it should be very malleable, I think. And to be open to letting it evolve and do that conversation you were talking about, like let the marks you start with kind of inform where the rest of it goes, and take breaks and make judgments at different times instead of doing it all in one go. I'm not really a fan of finishing a painting in one sitting anymore, where I used to be a fan of that. I like letting it simmer over like multiple sessions with drying in between. But yeah, I have recent paintings that are very much like I had an idea for this thing I want to paint, and then I just start, but I don't sketch it out in advance. I kind of just try to solve it compositionally on the canvas, and go and run with any mistakes or weird decisions, because they usually just make it more interesting in the long run. Like things I wouldn't choose to do become my favorite part.
Yeah.
I've noticed a lot of the subscribers on my YouTube channel are not even artists. They started subscribing because we did like magnet fishing, or talked about Black Sabbath or something like that.
Oh.
So that was kind of one of the reasons for asking you about what do you feel painting is for, or what it can do in someone's life, and maybe just to come full circle to that idea now that we've talked about all the minutia of it. Do you think if someone's feeling stuck in their life, they need an outlet for their emotions or a hobby? Like, can anyone pick up oil painting and get something like you do, get something out of it? Or is the reason you can do this and I can do this just because we like spent 20 plus years obsessing over stuff to varying degrees, and we have all that history and baggage? Is it accessible to anyone? Can you just buy some oil paints?
Yeah, I think so. I think anyone can do it if they want to. And anyone can make great work and express themselves in whichever way they find they need to.
I hope that's the case too. I want to say I agree.
Yeah.
But then I wonder, like, if someone would even know where to start. Like, how would you, I mean, to even stretch a canvas this big takes years of practice and
That's true.
knowledge.
Yeah.
And yeah, you can start small. You can just buy a pre-stretched canvas or work on paper or something and get sort of the same thrill out of making something manifest that wasn't there before. But the cynic in me feels like we only get fulfillment out of it because of like our educations and what we do for a living now, and it's kind of our whole world is built around it.
Yeah.
Where this is kind of supporting our day jobs and vice versa.
That's true. The pressure of all of that history definitely adds to pushing forward.
Yeah, it does feel like a job, right? Mm-hmm. Like being in the studio, whether you're making money directly off of it or not, it's kind of like something you feel called to do with your time.
Yeah. That's a good way to put it. Called to do.
Yeah. Well, maybe that's a good place to wrap up.
Okay.
I hate doing that. Well, thank you so much, Larissa, for having me.
Thank you for coming.
And
it's an honor.
Oh, it's an honor to be here. That's a cute little blue one there.
I don't know.
I love that like patterny blue flower thing, though, that is also in the big one.
Thanks. It's hard to deal with. I created a big problem.
Just walk in carrying the flask. I probably shouldn't do that.
Yeah,
but I'm going to cut around it. It doesn't matter.
Okay.